Iran's latest demands to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. The Parliament Speaker laying out Iran's requirements a few hours ago. Take a listen.
And let me make it clear, until America implements its commitments under the Memorandum of Understanding, including lifting the blockade on the release of frozen assets, lifting the oil sanctions, ending threats and military operations on all fronts, and other conditions that America has agreed to under the understanding, the strait will not be reopened.
Well, this comes after a Maritime Monitor reports another ship was struck while transiting through the Strait of Hormuz, hit by an unknown projectile. Well, I want to bring in senior White House reporter Betsy Klein. And Betsy, tell us what more you're hearing from the White House this hour related to that.
Well, Christina, yesterday that memorandum of understanding that had been reached between the U.S. and Iran officially expired, with no nuclear deal, no clear strategy to end this war, and traffic in the Strait of Hormuz, that critical oil thoroughfare, still severely restricted. Now, the Strait of Hormuz remains one of the thorniest remaining issues in this conflict. Prior to this war, no one had full control over the Strait of Hormuz. And then on Friday, President Trump suggested that it would become a U.S. territory. He posted a map today, you can see there on the screen, that says new U.S. territories circling the Strait of Hormuz. And maritime law experts, of course, have been skeptical of this move. And it comes at the same time that Iranian officials are laying out their new demands for reopening this strait. They say that the U.S. blockade must end. They want the release of frozen assets, as well as removal of oil sanctions and the end of military threats and operations in this strait. Now, yesterday we heard from one of the president's top negotiators, Jared Kushner. He said that discussions between the U.S. and Iran were more robust than they had ever been. He also said that the conversations were positive and active. Now, President Trump directly contradicting that just moments ago in a new post to social media. He says, quote, "There are no talks or conversations going on or scheduled with the Islamic Republic of Iran. The naval blockade remains in full force and effect. The Hormuz Strait is open and operating. All water mines have been removed or detonated." Now, all of this is still very much a political problem for this White House. The president has said that political calculations are not factoring into his thinking, including those upcoming midterm elections just a couple of weeks away now. But the president's approval rating stands at just 33% in a new Reuters Ipsos poll. We have also seen the price of gas at its highest since July. And all of this is weighing on Republicans both here in Washington and across the country, as the president suggests that he is not in a rush to get this conflict completed.
Stephen, I just want to start with the latest Truth Social post from the president from just over around an hour ago, which shows the Strait of Hormuz labelled as new U.S. territory. Your thoughts on that post and how you think Oman, Iran and the UAE will be viewing that at this point?
I think that at a time when a lot of Donald Trump's big foreign policy moves seem to be hitting a brick wall, this is another sign that a classic Trumpian move, the reinvention of reality and the subversion of truth to a more politically palatable one, is not working for him. I'm sure that Iran will view this as another sign of Trump's frustration. And of course, the reality is that Iran's attacks on shipping in the Strait have largely strangled the flow of oil and gas along a key exporting route. The question of Oman is a very interesting one as well, because if there's going to be a solution to this, it looks increasingly like the US will not be able to impose it because it's failed to bring Tehran to heel and has no trust in its relationship with Iran. It will have to come through the Gulf states. The most likely conduit for that right now is Oman talking to Tehran. And in fact, the memorandum of understanding, which was fractured but officially expired on Monday, actually mandated Oman to talk to Iran on the future of the Strait. So threatening to bomb an intermediary that may offer the only way out of this I think, expresses the lack of strategy and the frustration at this situation in the White House. You can't have intermediaries that just follow the US foreign policy line, because that would make them on the US side, and their negotiation position would be absolutely useless. So none of it, as the senator there says, makes an awful lot of sense.
Yeah, well let's talk a bit about strategy, because in your analysis for CNN today, you write, quote, Trump's swipes at Oman and South Korea are not isolated incidents. They are symptomatic of a foreign policy that lacks conventional strategy, deliberately sidelines diplomats and experts, and seems to spring only from his gut. So, Stephen, if there is no conventional strategy behind these moves, what is the strategy, if indeed there is one?
Well, it's very hard to see one, and I think this has been the problem with the war from the start. It was based on the false assumption that Iran would quickly cave, the regime would fall in the face of overwhelming US and Israeli force, and it would all be over in a matter of weeks or even a matter of days. So there has never been, I think, any capacity in the White House to think about, okay, so if we take this step, what happens next? That is very characteristic of Trump's leadership style. He's impulsive, he's unpredictable. In some cases, in his first term and perhaps during his second term, that sense of putting the world on edge and taking the counterintuitive move in foreign policy, sometimes that has been working for him. Sometimes it is a way of imposing US power on smaller countries. But right now, Trump just lashing out seems to be failing. And I think you could argue, if you look at developments in the Gulf over the last 2 or 3 days, that we are potentially on the verge of an escalation rather than getting towards the end of this. And of course, as the midterm elections approach, that is going to be very difficult for Trump. It's imposing a great deal of pressure on Republicans. And that tension almost seems to be making Trump even more erratic and is bringing out the more unpredictable sides of his nature.
Yes, and I mean, on the ground, all of this is having an impact on regional partnerships as well. I mean, you argue that Trump sees alliances more as deals where allies have to pay for protection. I mean, how are we seeing that play out, especially in the Gulf, as regional partners look to themselves rather than relying on the US?
Yeah, exactly. There is a growing sense in the Gulf that the guarantees that they thought they had, that the United States would protect them against Iran, cannot be counted upon in the future. One possible scenario is that the US just ends up walking away from this and leaving a real mess in the Gulf. If you talk to people in the Gulf, they argue that there has to be some kind of regional framework in the future. There's been talk even of an arrangement with Iran to manage the strait and the traffic flows in and out to oil facilities around the region. That might be the way that this finally ends, even if it ends up perhaps infringing upon the principle of freedom of navigation if some kind of transit fee ends up getting charged. But, it doesn't seem as though the relationships that the Gulf thought they had with the United States can sustain this war. And that, I think, is something that is happening more broadly across Europe, and with Trump's pressure on South Korea in recent days, which was motivated by his anger that they didn't sign up to his war in Iran, even though the US relationship with South Korea is specific to the Korean Peninsula and it has nothing to do with wider security interests.
President Trump says there are no talks ongoing right now. Trump's envoy, Jared Kushner, on the other hand, indicated just yesterday that talks were in fact taking place. At the same time, Iran is narrowing its demands for reopening the Strait of Hormuz. Is there any way for these two sides to get things back on track?
Yes. My own assessment is it's a 2 in 3 chance that ultimately we're going to get to a deal here, because neither side, Wolf, has an incentive to continue on and on and on into the war. And I think if, as reported, this new set of demands, you used the term narrowing, that's a very good sign, because what I didn't see on that list, for example, was a demand that all U.S. forces leave the region. I didn't see a demand for massive reparations. What you see, and you put it up again, are within the realm of a conversation that I think could lead to a deal. So I think the bad news is apparently there are no robust conversations. The good news is if this is the new narrowed list of demands, I think there's trade space in there to get to yes.
Congressman, I do want to ask you, because you do have experience as an international businessman and as an ambassador, in foreign policy in Congress and the House Foreign Affairs Committee. The president put out a social media post today that has a picture of the Strait of Hormuz, and it is circled, and it says new U.S. territory. The Strait of Hormuz, of course, is not open. It's constricted, certainly, to shipping right now. He claims it as a new U.S. territory here. In terms of reality, in terms of political messaging, in terms of maybe what the international community thinks about that, what's the impact of this?
Well, I think it's another absurd statement by the president. I mean, get in line. After Greenland, he's not going to, we're not going to take the Straits of Hormuz as United States territory. He also threatened to bomb Oman, one of our strong allies in the region. I mean, what's going on over there? We've spent $37 billion to have the Straits of Hormuz in the same position they were at before he attacked Iran.